strong in the strength which God supplies through his eternal Son, strong in the Lord of hosts, and in
Friends, welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Don Baker. That was Onward Christian Soldiers.
No, the soldiers of Christ arise.
Soldiers of Christ. Okay.
Arise.
It'll make sense shortly. How y'all doing? It's we're live. It's February 24th, 2008. I'd like to welcome everybody who's watching us live in Austin. We love to hear from you guys. And also, the audio portion of this program is available as an audio podcast from our website, and the video is now available on Google Video. We've got episodes going back for years, just literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of quality atheist programming. As I said, we're live. It's a public access television program. We will be taking live calls. We'll have the number up for you shortly, but we've got some general announcements to get out of the way as usual. Those of you listening on podcast who are sick and tired of hearing about all the good stuff that we do in Austin, you can fast forward about 4.5 minutes or so, and you'll get right to the meat. We get occasional emails about that. Why do you have to keep doing all these announcements? I don't know, because it's the atheist community of Austin, and we're trying to inform people in Austin about things we're doing. But we do appreciate all the email that we're getting from around the world, the people who are interested in the program and supporting what we do. We thank you for that. And by the way, anybody who wants to contact the show who doesn't get through on the telephone today or doesn't want to, can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes. You can visit the ACA website, www.atheist-community.org. And the reason you can do all that is because we're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning at around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. The March lecture, which was originally postponed to March, is now going to have to be postponed again. Mark Lowy was supposed to speak on black body radiation. Unfortunately, work commitments have come up, and he's not going to be able to do that. We thank everybody for their patience, and we thank Mark for being willing to postpone this and do it another time. If we can get another lecture in, I won't get another chance to announce it, will I? That's next Sunday.
Next Sunday. That's right.
So for those of you in the Austin area, just come on down anyway. We've still got the space reserved. We'll be there, and there'll either be a lecture or we'll come up with something fun.
We can watch the website. We'll get it.
We'll get more information at the website as things progress. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. It's PROPHETS. The website was just up on your screen a minute ago, and I bet they're putting it up back up now because that's just the kind of guys they are. We're live every other Saturday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. We'll be live this coming Saturday, which I think is March 1st, isn't it?
Saturday? No.
Well, whatever the date is, we're live. We don't take live calls in the nonprofits, but we do run a chat room in conjunction with the program. For more information, you can go to the website to figure out how to connect. You can also email us as well. We're going to be probably making some slight changes, and hopefully, well, we've got this digital telephone hybrid, which we've only made use of a couple times. And part of it's my fault, but we're going to probably make some changes that will allow some special guests to call in soon. So stay tuned for that as well. In addition to both of those programs, the ACA also sponsors a number of weekly social interactive programs and things like Atheist Happy Hour every Thursday at the Dog and Duck Pub beginning at around 7 o'clock. We are also having a number of special events. As a reminder, there's a pub crawl for those of you in the Austin area. On March 8th, there'll be more information at the website for any members or potential members or friends of members who are interested in the pub crawl. Get a hold of us quickly. I mean, we've ordered some T-shirts for the event, and basically we're going to start at one pub and walk around Austin and visit others. This angry, evil atheist alliance mob of godless heathens is going to go out and get a beer. Or 10. Anyway, it should be a lot of fun, and for those of you interested in that kind of thing, please feel free to join us. And also, after the program's over, we all get together for dinner at El Arroyo on 5th Street. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member. If you don't get through on the TV show today, but you'd still like to talk to us, in addition to being able to email, you're welcome to come down and join us at El Arroyo as well. The show runs till 4:30. We get down there around 5 o'clock and stay till 7-ish or so. Also, Dawkins, as in Richard Dawkins, will be coming to Austin March 19th. The Atheist Longhorns, in conjunction with CFI, are putting this together. I believe the event starts at 7 p.m., unless that's a 9, and I just can't read my own handwriting. We'll have more information at the website. Also, you can, we need to put up contact information for how they can get a hold of the Atheist Longhorns as well.
Yeah, well, I believe the details of that is it's going to be in the Hogg Auditorium. This is for sure now.
Yes.
And it'll be at 7, and it's going to be a first come, first served. So there'll probably be a big queue of people lined up to come watch it. You know, I'm guessing 6 and 5 p.m. Of course, students have a little more free time than everybody else, so I'm sure they'll be there in line having a little party, waiting for the event to start.
I'll be there even if I'm late.
Okay.
You couldn't lock me out.
Should be good. I guess he's promoting his book.
Yes, his books just hit paperback after selling a ridiculous amount in hardback, which I'm thrilled about. I enjoyed that book. It's I don't know that it's the best treatment of every subject in there. It's been kind of some interesting criticisms of all these atheist books. You know, oh, that's the new atheism, and they're attacking religion, and
they're militant.
Yeah, they're militant, and they're not arguing about a real
vaguely
God.
appropriate for.
They're not arguing about any real God. Nobody really believes what they're talking about, and well, you know, if nobody really believed what those guys are talking about, good. Good. However, you know, I know plenty of people who do believe what those guys are talking about. Some of them call into the show. Some of them I see at their churches. Some of them send me emails. Some of them want to, you know, punch me in the face or send me to hell or whatever. I brought the helmet today just in case. I figure I can, you know, duck and cover a little bit.
Was that your helmet?
Yes.
Okay.
This is mine from a long, long time ago. I am now safe from Jesus's thugs, or at least partially safe. It stops about here, so if you shoot low. No, and it kind of reminds me too, because Ray Comfort recently had a blog post about it, in his attempt to be humorous, that atheists evolved from chickens, because we're all willing to bash Christianity, but we're afraid to say anything about Islam.
Well, Islam thinks that Christians and Jews evolved from pigs and monkeys.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess it's all just turnabout is fair play.
Muhammad and I disagree with you, Ray. Sorry. My world
But
famous
I interrupted your
Muhammad
point.
podcast.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. It wasn't that good.
It wasn't that good?
No.
Yeah, I read that too. It's like, well, you know, what Ray Comfort doesn't seem to realize is about
Everything?
Well, lots of things. But about 80% of our criticism against Christianity also applies to Islam.
Right.
It's like, you know, this holy
you're
book
talking
idea
about-
is crazy.
Right.
You know, you all worship the same God, so any complaint we have about that God is all apropos.
Plus, we spend a great deal of time talking about the God concept in general.
Sure.
There are a number of
And the lack
arguments
of evidence, right, for the
for the
whole thing.
existence of God, and basically, if you want to claim that you believe it on faith, congratulations. Faith is a permission slip to let you believe anything you want without having a good reason, because as soon as you have a good reason, there's no more need of faith. And I can't say anything against anybody who says, I just believe this on faith. Great. Believe whatever you like. When it comes time to decide why other people should believe you, why they should agree with you, why you should be able to legislate your beliefs onto other people, that's where we have a point of contention. I prefer that everybody embrace reality, and I'd rather everybody have beliefs that are justifiable, that are as true or likely to be true and least likely to be false as possible. I prefer that people make decisions based on good evidence and rationality. But if you believe something on faith, okay, enjoy. I'm not trying to steal the hope of an afterlife away from your dying grandmother. That's just not the point. You know, and we're not attacking individuals. We're talking about ideas and the justifications for them. And when we open up the phone lines, you're welcome to discuss what Don's talking about or anything else you want. And in particular, as I stress every week now, I'm interested in knowing what you believe, why you believe it, and most importantly, why you think somebody else should. What reason is there for your belief that should also be a valid reason for somebody else? Because that's the way that true understanding works. That's the way that scientific evidence and rational evidence and good sound argument work to drive our understanding of reality. if you have some esoteric belief that cheers alone, what good does it do us? And I didn't mean to get into a rant after the announcements. Don's here. There's a reason for the helmet. So tell us, what are we talking about?
I decided, I've actually been asked for months to talk about the atheists in the military and some of the things that they face. And I went and did a little research on that. And atheists are like a lot of other minorities in the military that have to deal with being in an environment where they are the minority, and there's a whole issue of protection of the various viewpoints and such, which is the military does generally pretty well, I would say. Blacks are treated generally very well in the military. They didn't used to be, but they are now. These sorts of things. But the topic I really found of interest is that there is a group, a subgroup of Christianity, not all Christians by any means, are actually attempting a sort of a takeover of the military. And this is a pretty well-organized faction who are actively subverting the Constitution, the military chain of command, and other laws. They're actively persecuting those that don't join them or those that stand in their way. And they're subverting the military for their own ends, completely separate from U.S. foreign policy. And, if you think that if you know that the U.S. military is the most lethal organization on the planet, you should be a little concerned about any group at all coming in and trying to subvert the military. That's a serious issue. So and the fact that it's a Christian group or whatever doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not that's not so important. So fortunately, there's one group called the. I'll talk about them later. There's one group working hard to stop this, which is good. But here's a quote just to set the stage for the talk. This is from Jason Leopold, who wrote about military evangelism. He writes, at a time when the United States is encouraging greater religious freedom in Muslim nations, soldiers on the battlefield have been told disturbing stories of being force-fed fundamentalist Christianity by highly controversial apocalyptic, quote, end times evangelists who have infiltrated the U.S. military installations throughout the world with the blessing of high-level officials at the Pentagon. Proselytizing among military personnel has been conducted openly in violation of the basic tenets of the United States Constitution. So this is what I want to talk about today. So I want to talk about who's behind this, who's doing this, what are their motivations, what are some of their tactics, and what's wrong with this sort of thing, which hopefully will be clear to a lot of people watching, and then what has been the response. So this is what I wanted to hit today. So you keep going? Okay, who's behind this? Well, there's a whole bunch of different groups with various names. Some of them are like the Officers of Christian Fellowship, the Campus Crusade for Christ and their little subgroup, the Military Ministry. There's the Military Christian Fellowship. There's James Dobson, Focus on the Family, who's very active in Colorado Springs, and not surprisingly, one of their little battlegrounds is the Air Force Academy, which happens to also be in Colorado Springs. There's a group called the Christian Embassy that proselytizes in the Pentagon. There's many other subsidiary and related groups involved, but the unifying theme in these groups is they tend to have two flavors of Christianity. They tend to have the dominionist flavor and the dispensationalist flavor. Now, the dominionists, dominionism describes, I'm quoting here from Wikipedia, the great social knowledge, dominionism describes in several distinct ways a tendency among conservative, politically active Christians to seek an influence or control over secular government through political action, aiming either at a nation governed by Christians or a nation governed by a conservative Christian understanding of biblical law. And this whole dominionism thing goes back to a quote in Genesis, in the Old Testament, Genesis 1:28, and God blessed Adam and Eve. And God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." So dominionists sort of take that and they say, oh, that means that Christians have to kind of have dominion over non-Christians. So it's not about fish anymore. It's about, it's about controlling other people, which is not too surprisingly. And in my mind, dominionism is not too far different than the Nazism, because it's like, we're better than everybody else and we need to control the world. It's the same sort of mindset. So, and we're God's favorite people sort of thing. So the other unifying theme in the groups doing this military takeover is dispensationalists. And this is getting into the whole end times prophecies of, Jesus is going to come back, and there's going to be, this bloody thing, and a bunch of Israelis are going to go up to heaven, but a big batch of Christians are going to float up to heaven, and all this complete nonsense. I personally consider this snuff porn for Christians. It's getting off on the torture and torment of other people for your kind of jollies, and I don't think very highly of it if it's not very clear from that statement.
To be fair, though, and I'll
please chime in.
Oddly enough, I'm going to be the voice of reason today. The dominionist movement and the dispensationalist movement, they're relatively small. The problem is that they're extremely vocal and fairly well funded in order to get their things going.
They're disproportionately powerful.
Yeah. With regard to comparing it to kind of like Nazism mentality and we're better and things like that, you're right. But the average person in the movement doesn't see it that way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's because their mind has been so polluted by these religious ideas. It's almost identical to this idea of hell, where they want to save you from hell, and they don't want to acknowledge the fact that there wouldn't be a hell or any reason to go to hell or any of these other things within the scope of what their theology is if it wasn't for the God they worship. He's this big mafia thug who wants his vig, your prayers and your worship. He doesn't want to break your legs. Why would I want to break your legs? Forget about it. But if you don't love me and you don't pay your vig, I'm going to bust you up. That's the way it is. And yet, these are the henchmen of this big thug, and they look at it as, no, he doesn't want to hurt you. He just wants you to be part of the family. Come on, give us a little tribute here.
Yeah, it is an extortion racket.
It is. It's hard to explain to the people who are on the inside that, and I have been there, that the way you're viewing this is so biased in favor of these presuppositions that God exists, first of all, and that he's good, second of all, which is actually a judgment you make after the fact. But I don't want to sidetrack what you're talking about, so keep going.
Yeah, well, on the dominionism thing, I think that, there's a giant industry surrounding, this end times stuff, right? This Tim LaHaye's books and movies and all that, and this has been going on for a while. And one of the things that's very telling, I think, is they identify these words in the Bible with various political events going on around the world. That's basically the gist of it. It's a Rorschach test of what does this Bible say about our current situation, and when does Jesus coming, and can we count the days, and all these sorts of things. That's the gist of it.
That's, by the way, how they do all prophecy everywhere all the time. Look up Nostradamus' stuff. Ooh, look, I can reinterpret this quatrain to let me look just like this. Right.
And to emphasize that this is interpretation, there's this idea in the Bible of Gog and Magog. And this place or people or whatever the hell it is was supposed to be in Russia back during the Cold War, and now it's in the Middle East, and This tells me that they don't know what the heck they're talking about. They're making this stuff up. Of course, the people making this up are making lots of money on it, and that's really all it is kind of making money off the deluded. But they're selling this very sort of misanthropic sort of worldview that I think the world would be so much better off without. Anyway. That's it for theology. Let me move on to talk about the motivations. So given that these people are dominionists and dispensationalists and Christians, why would they be motivated to come and take advantage of the military? Well, if you're a dominionist, you're after world domination for Christ, and having the world's biggest military at your disposal is certainly helpful towards doing that, right? So some of their ideas are extracting God's justice by force, if necessary. and rewarding those that God likes. So there are other dominionist efforts going around, and I'll just touch on them very briefly. These are tangents that you can follow if you want to look on the web. We have James Dobson, who has vetted Supreme Court nominees. In particular, it came out that Harriet Miers, Bush was the very first called Dobson before he even announced it, and was checking out Harriet Miers with James Dobson. So Dobson has a disproportionate amount of, and he's a dominionist, by the way.
I think, by the way, that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
If he called Dobson first, and Dobson said, don't nominate her, we'd have never heard the name of the lady who works in the closet down the office from Bush.
Right.
So obviously Dobson went ahead and vetted her and said, yeah, go for it. When you have one of the most ridiculously unqualified people you could have picked, or one, not the most unqualified,
but pretty high,
definitely a really, really low choice, to the point where, she was basically laughed out of the nomination.
It was an embarrassment. Yeah, it was an embarrassment. We have the Blackwater paramilitary group. They're led by Dominionists. We have the National Day of Prayer is a Dominionist thing. It's not really for all Christians. It's a particular branch of Christianity. Or not all people. We have the hijacking of the U.S. AIDS relief for proselytization by Dominionists. We probably, House Resolution 8888 that I talked about the last time I was on, and other constitutional sabotaging efforts are related to the Dominionists. So they get around. They're a pretty powerful group. They're pretty good at screwing things up, as far as I'm concerned. Dispensationalists. Why would dispensationalists want to control the military? Well, they're all about this end time stuff, and if they can create or participate in their psychotic prophecies about Israel and all this stuff, control of the Middle East and making this stuff play out, boy, that would be great to bring Jesus back, wouldn't it? They can have a big orgasm with Jesus. And the net result is that everybody else will be brutally murdered by Jesus, and they're trying to bring this about because they think this is the big event of their lives, and a huge number of people in the United States think that this is going to happen in their lifetime.
Yeah, and to be fair again, not all of them are necessarily on the same page about what should be done or to what extent, or some of them don't even think that this is God's plan, so they obviously can't interfere.
Yeah,
and yet what they're doing is they're still giving money to and supporting the people who are trying to manipulate specifically Israel and everything that's going on there in order to facilitate this second coming, which, by the way, I'm sure if Stan called in today and you can if you want, but he'd tell you it already happened, the second coming.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who think that it already happened. But when Jesus said...
Was it Matthew Shepard?
No.
Okay.
When Jesus said there'll be some of you still standing here today who will not taste death before all these things.
Right.
But he actually did come back, and the Bible just doesn't record it in the way that makes it clear.
Well, that makes more sense. So who are some of these dispensationalisms? We have dispensationalists. We have James Hagee, who is down there in San Antonio. And one of his things is he's training his followers to go lobby Congress as individuals for war against Iran. He's actually got his troops on the ground trying to do that, and meanwhile, he's making money on books. We have Ted Haggard. Who's
completely heterosexual.
So when he's not a poster child for Christian hypocrisy, he was actually president of the National Association of Evangelicals, and he was calling the White House weekly and lobbying Bush about end times prophecies and how that should influence foreign policy. And that's the creepiest thing about the guy. It's not his
meth addiction and in addition to him being completely heterosexual now, it turns out he's probably not. He's also completely irrelevant. None of the evangelicals want anything at all to do with him. They just released an announcement saying...
God doesn't heal him?
No, they just released an announcement saying that he left his spiritual counseling before we could really cure him of the gay. And so now we'd prefer that he not be allowed to preach anywhere. So he's basically... Ted, the best thing you could possibly do, come out. Come out on all fronts. Come out as a gay man, come out as an atheist, come out as a drug addict, come out as an idiot, I don't care. But come out Stop lurking around with these evangelicals who don't want you. It's obvious that you're disingenuous. You've been found out. You're a complete joke to these people, and now they want to shuffle you off to a corner. Screw them. Embrace who you are. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with everybody.
Well, he built up this big ministry that was making, lots and lots of money, and then they shuffle him off, so I don't know whether that money's his or whether, it's all very murky to me. But,
I don't know.
so getting
Maybe
back to motive.
if he just went away.
Well, I don't know. We've had a lot of fun with him. At a distance.
Oh.
At a distance. Okay.
Go.
Okay.
We stalled on 10.
We stalled. So I'm getting back to motivations. We talked about the motivations of the dominionists, the motivations of the dispensationalists. Proselytization is a big motivation for taking over the military. So there's this notion of you can take advantage of the chain of the structure of command in order to proselytize within the military, and then you can also use the military as missionaries, which is a big thing. There's this notion of defeating non-Christians, either militarily or via intimidation. There's suppression of rival beliefs, subjugation of the Constitution, and these sorts of things. So these are some of the motivations.
Here's my thing, is that I'm not completely sure that this kind of tactic, I have no idea if it could ever work or not. Because on the one hand, I don't want to sound, we're not advocating any kind of conspiracy theory in the UFO tinfoil hat sense, that the dominionists and the dispensationalists are going to take over the military, and then then it's going to be world domination. Wah-ha-ha. But there are specific goals. There are some things they can achieve. There are some things they can't. I don't see with the policies of the government, the policies of the military, and the fact that the military is largely made up of real people. That there are atheists in the military. There are people who don't care about religious issues. This is a job to them. They may be Christian, but they don't particularly practice their Christianity or care about it, and certainly wouldn't fall into the dominionist category. So some of it seems to be kind of an infiltration in certain commanders, certain leadership positions, where somebody may get promoted because they share a certain belief, or somebody may not get promoted, or may get early promotion, whatever. I just don't know that. I mean, it's kind of like the dominionists are also trying to take over, like, Congress and the government, and have influence there. I'm not convinced that can actually succeed. I'm convinced that it's enough of a threat, and it's enough of an issue that the public needs to be made aware of it, so that we don't sleepwalk into that kind of problem. But I don't know that their end goals of kind of taking over either the government or the military are actually doable.
Well, you're probably right, but let me give you another perspective, and that is, if they can influence things in their favor and take advantage, even in a limited way, of this very powerful organization, then they're sort of getting a lot of leverage.
Right, and I think, that's a huge problem. I've talked before. I don't think churches should be tax-free by default. I think they should have to justify it. They should open their books, and if they say, hey, we're doing this much good in the community, fine, give them a tax break. I don't care that they happen to be religious. Are you doing good in the community? Well, what we've done is allowed them to keep their books closed, shuffle money off, and oh, by the way, you get to be a nonprofit as long as you don't tinker with politics, and yet they do, from the pulpit, at the voting booths, everything. Yeah.
Well, and there's another thing too that should be said, and that is, I think that of all the groups in the world, I think Christians do the best job of having a very, very, very long-term view of things, and having sort of a plan of action that they carry out, and they're very, very persistent in tearing down this separation of church and state. They've been at it for a long time. They're going to continue to be at it. No one particular thing is going to slow them down very much. They're just going to keep going. And so, I admire that persistence, but I wish it were, directed at something good.
Yeah, positive. Instead of trying to convince everybody to think like you, which, by the way, isn't a bad thing as long as you're able to justify what your views are. But, there's all kinds of positive things. I mean, we talked about it before. If you sold off the massive wealth, let's say, of the Catholic Church and turned Vatican City into a shelter for homeless people, you could probably fill that place and feed them forever on the interest alone. It's just insane.
Yeah.
And why aren't they doing this? I mean, it wasn't Jesus' whole thing, feed the poor, blessed are the poor. I mean, it's just... Instead, they seem to be stockpiling wealth, and you have to ask why. And this is one of the reasons.
Yeah, it's a very long-term view.
Whether or not they're effective, whether or not they've infiltrated every area of the government, and then they're cackling over their master plan to subvert everybody who's not a Christian, doesn't really matter. So what exactly are they doing?
Well, what are they doing? Well,
now
I want to talk a little bit about some of the details of what's going on, and I've kind of divided into categories, and I have a little tension here. I want to make this concrete for people, but and there's a lot of little examples, and each one it may not be particularly powerful. Some of them are, but just the breadth of it is pretty stunning. So, for example, it used to be in the Air Force they had a policy that said military professionals must remember that religious choice is a matter of individual conscience. Professionals, and especially commanders, must not take it upon themselves to change or coercively influence the religious views of subordinates. Now, this was part of the military Air Force Code of Ethics in 1997, but this has since been removed. And that's very symbolic, I think, of the change that's going on, is that whole attitude has been removed, not just in the Air Force, but throughout.
So what we did was we had language that supported the First Amendment, that supported the right of everyone to believe according to their conscience,
and now that's gone.
ripped it out.
They ripped it out.
Why would they do that?
Well, they don't want to. Don't want to have these people who are victims of this sort of thing point at this thing and say, you got problems here. It gives them sort of one less thing to grab onto to pull themselves out. So I have proselytization within the military as a category. I have military as proselytizers as another category, and I have persecution as a third. And I just want to hit some of these things here. One thing that's happened is we have this notion of the military chaplain, and the military chaplain should be someone who supports believers of all stripes in times of need and giving them comfort and help and spiritual guidance and these sorts of things. But what's happened is the chaplains have sort of been taken over. Right now, the largest share of chaplains, is my understanding, throughout the military is now evangelical Christians, and there's many more of them than there used to be. So in a sense, we've sort of added a lot of new chaplains, and they tend to be of this particular stripe that I'm talking about. And so they're there, and they've also adopted an attitude where we can proselytize to the unchurched or anybody who doesn't have beliefs. We can go after them, and they've actually had a big lawsuit about this, and there was one chaplain who claimed to be persecuted by this idea, when in actuality he's working for the federal government and he should be helping all people, not just promoting his particular viewpoints. So this gets all back into church-state separation issues, which we'll get into later. We have problems where we have captive audience ceremonies and captive audience events where there's a military commander doing a sermon, or they've brought in the chaplains to do sermons or do outside performers at mandatory events, and this is in violation of the church-state separation. We have command military personnel sort of preaching and promoting their viewpoints, and it's very, very hard in that sort of environment for people to stand up. I mean, people in the military give up a lot of their rights, and they sort of have to follow the command. I mean, that's the first thing they have to do. And so when you have a commander telling you, using their power over you, that puts them at a conflict of interest. We have military commanders, putting up banners, J for Jesus or Team Jesus, or there was a chant where the response was "Rock, sir," and that meant, Jesus built his church on a rock, and it was basically a military indoctrination or a religious indoctrination thing.
So it wasn't ROXXOR, like elite speak.
No.
Roxor's my boxers.
No, nothing like that. Air Force Academy has systematically promoted the movie The Passion of the Christ, encouraging everyone to go. And that's basically that's a religious movie if there ever was one.
I don't know how religious that movie is. It's definitely good gore.
It's bloody, yeah.
I mean, it's gruesome.
So some of the instruction manuals for some of these groups, they say that the instruction manual also says that soldiers are more vulnerable in stressful situations, and that military missions network members can tap into that vulnerability to proselytize and perhaps convince soldiers to embrace Christianity. It also encourages people, evangelizers, to come in and figure out what makes people tick. It says, find out what makes them tick, find out what their questions are, their interests, what do they wrestle with, get to know their background, learn their language and find out what words and concepts connect with them and which ones make their eyes glaze over, then speak to them in their own language. So this is kind of an encouraging people to come in and proselytize within the military ranks. There's a notion of using military as proselytizers. So basically, one of the big benefits here is if you really are able to raise a lot of people within the military who share your viewpoint, is then they become they're disproportionately leaders that go out and lead in the world, and the campus groups, or these groups, tend to realize that. And there's a group called the Campus Crusade for Christ that is very active in the Air Force Academy and other places. And I have a video here, guys. Can we play it? And you can hear it in their own words. Half a second before you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one area where this is going to be effective, and I think my friends in the audience will back me up, is as structured as the military is, with specific requirements. You have to do this for advancement. It's also very much a hookup organization. You've got a buddy, you're in with this guy, he's going to help you out. There are ways of getting around certain things, of skirting rules. Having a kind of sub-network within the military, where one guy's doing favors for another guy, and the basis for this is a shared common religious view. That is somewhere where they can potentially
it's very powerful
really
notion.
good inroads that would be really effective.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just in my limited experience, having done a little over 8 years or so, I got to admit, as much as I'd like to think that I was this paragon of virtue, I was just a human, Christian, fallible person at the time. So my buddies got hooked up, and the guys I didn't like didn't.
Sure.
And it was the same way in dealing with other people. And so that kind of little network within the network can be really effective at certain things.
Well, I guess that's how the world works, and to some extent. But I'm not sure we want to add to that in the military. I'm not sure we want to. I'm not sure we want to create and foster that sort of environment, us and them. And I think that's part of what's going on with this.
So you got a video.
I have a little video clip. This is from a video created by the Campus Crusade for Christ, and you'll see a guy by the name of Scott Blum on the video.
Are you starting at the right spot?
Yeah, I've got it at the right spot. And we'll just hear in his own words why he thinks proselytizing at the Air Force is so important.
At the Air Force Academy and around the world. And I think that we're seeing God do that. We're seeing kids come to Christ, being built up in their faith, and being sent out to reach the world. They're government-paid missionaries when they leave here. I'm not sure I would still be here.
Okay, I don't know if you heard the beginning of that, but the punchline was his saying, they're going to be government-paid missionaries when they leave here. So there's very much this idea of, let's turn these people into missionaries, and furthermore, we don't have to pay for them; the government's paying for them, and I can't imagine a clearer statement of them co-opting the military. So, and part of the deal is they want, military people to go proselytize in other countries. There was a big snafu about a group called Operation Straight Up that was trying to, among other things, create Arabic versions of the Bible and Arabic proselytization materials to give to the troops so that when they went over to Iraq, they could go and proselytize. And this is a huge problem, folks. This is actually providing, it's not even propaganda, providing evidence to the other side that the U.S. is a Christian nation trying to take over the world. I mean,
right.
it plays into that. And let me tell you, the propagandists on the other side are making hay with this, and the world knows about this, and American people really are pretty ignorant, by and large. There's other places where the military has been used as proselytizers. People like General Boykin came out in uniform and was yammering on about how we're going to have to win in the war in Iraq for Christ, and the Islamic God is an idol, and my God's bigger than your God, sort of thing. I actually agree that the Islamic God's an idol, but so is the Christian God, because they're the same God. So, but that's not his point. So we have a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of examples where people in power, and in this video I showed you actually had 3 or 4 people in uniform on duty, which is a violation of their command to actually be promoting an outside organization. It doesn't matter what the outside organization is, right? They shouldn't be doing that. Finally, with persecution, we have special treatment of for non-believers. A woman came this morning to our breakfast and sat down and gave me a first-hand account where she was in the military, and they actually had some sort of outdoor exercise that they were going to do, and it was a terrible, miserable, ugly, rainy, cold day, and they had to all go out and do that. But then at the last minute, the commander brought in his chaplain and said, well, hey, we're going to have a little religious service for the next 30 minutes. There's coffee and donuts, and come join us. And hey, if you don't want to attend this service, you can go out and stand at attention during this service. And that's actually something that happened. And this sort of thing happens very frequently, where people are singled out based on their religious beliefs or with their willingness to listen to a religious message, and this just simply doesn't belong. There's another example where a rabbi chaplain was persecuted by his fellow chaplains. His fellow chaplains hung Nazi uniforms and swastikas on the wall of the officers' club in the Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, during an interfaith prayer breakfast that he was required to attend. And it's like, that just doesn't belong there. This doesn't belong. I can go through a lot of other examples. There's one other one that I just had to hit because it just struck me as so insane. There is on an MP office door, military police office door in Fort Riley, there is a poster from Ann Coulter that has a nice sketch of her and has her as a pretty woman, even though she's kind of, they filed off her horns and that sort of thing. The poster reads, we should invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity. And so, the sentiment, people are allowed to have whatever sentiment they want, but the fact that this was displayed publicly means that this sort of attitude is pervasive, I think, in this military installation, and it just sort of plays into this whole idea of who's in charge here. So, if you don't mind, let me do one more little riff here on why this is a problem. We'll take some phone calls after this. The number's up. You want to give a little spiel about calling in?
Sure. As a reminder, we are a live call-in television program. The number's up on your screen now. Feel free to call in. You can talk about this topic or anything else that interests you. We do have a frequently asked questions page on the website. If you go to atheist-community.org and look around a little bit, you'll find that. We may direct you there instead of answering Pascal's wager for the 88th time this week. But we're going to let Don finish up with another section before we actually start getting the calls. I see that
we're starting to get some calls. Yeah,
phones are already lighting up. As a reminder, after the show's over, we'll be going to El Arroyo on 5th Street. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us, and that includes the people who call in as well. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. And if you're coming down to punch, which is going to be my 4th P from now on, I'm glad I brought my helmet. So why is this such a huge problem? Oh, what? Wait, I tried to segue and you wanted to comment.
Oh, I just had a mean comment, but I'll hold it. I'll hold it. Okay. So why is this military takeover a problem? I mean, if it doesn't bother, if what I've said so far doesn't bother you, let me spell it out. Okay, people who take public office and in the military, they take an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. And Article 6 of the Constitution says that there shall be no religious test for public office. You can go look that up. The First Amendment says that you're not supposed to be creating an establishment of religion. There's also the Free Exercise Clause. But
See, there's a caveat here, though. Yeah. While you're active duty military, you don't have the same protections as citizens.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, so it's an odd thing, right? That you actually give up some of your rights when you enter the military.
Which is one of the reasons why, even though I don't think it'll work in the broad sense, trying to infiltrate and build this structure within the military is perhaps the best idea, because the people that you're utilizing are already, to some extent, limited citizens.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you have a complaint, the guy that you're going to go to is in your chain of command, right? And so you have this problem where you might actually end up sabotaging your own career, by raising a complaint against your superior officer. Now, in real life, we have a lot more outlets and a lot more ways around that problem, but that's a serious problem. And then you have the problem where you're very vulnerable, to people who want to gang up on you. Maybe because you're not running as fast as you should or whatever, and they can gang up on you for this reason too.
Well, when Newdow originally brought his first case, which went all this way to the Supreme Court with regard to Under God and the Pledge, they turned it down because he didn't have standing. One of the things is that I believe I'm right, if I'm remembering this right, active duty military can't sue the government. So apart from internal methods of filing a grievance, and you can go around your immediate commander and try and work up the chain, but you can't sue. And so
they don't have access to the media either.
You're really limited in what you can do to protect your rights. Now, after you get out, then as a private citizen, you can try to sue them for things that happened while you were in. But by that time, what you're actually suing about, it's far too late. You've sacrificed your career,
and you may have lost standing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bad problem. So the problem I'm trying to raise with this oath to defend the Constitution is that these people, when they swear to defend the Constitution, many people do so with the caveat that God is some higher power and they serve God first. So in a sense, they lie on their oath. And I think that this is a serious problem. Anybody who lies on their oath when they go in should be rooted out. And it doesn't matter what the reason is, right? If you have a conflict of interest, then you are unfit for duty, right? And if you're playing mind games about, oh, well, God is more powerful than whatever, then, you're just kind of, living on another planet, in my opinion. And a lot of mind games are going on about, oh, well, this church-state separation doesn't apply to this, and that doesn't really exist. And this is the reason they're playing this game, is they want to have the power, but they also want to lie on their oath, and they're happy to do that. So they're happy to lie and violate laws because they feel that they are holding to a higher power. And so this is why you see, these violations of the Constitution and people lying on their oath of office, is they feel that they have a higher calling, and they're just using the U.S. and so on as a means to an end. So that's a serious problem. The second serious problem is the sabotage of the command and control of the armed services. We should be all very concerned about that, right? Military control is partly controlled now by religious leaders, and that's concerning. There's a lot of divisiveness and dissension within the ranks. There's a lot of hazing and persecution of people, and that's just not appropriate in a military context. We have persecution of patriots for their religious beliefs. I don't think that should be going on. If you have 5 generals that all believe that rapture is just around the corner, and if they just blow up Israel or blow up Iraq or whatever crazy idea they have in their mind, this is kind of a groupthink, and this is not good. We want to actually have a wide variety of viewpoints in the military. When we want to have people be able to express them and get them across, and we want to avoid making mistakes and avoid doing things that we can't draw back from, right?
Yeah, the problem isn't so much that these generals would get together and just decide, oh, the hell with the rules, let's go bomb stuff and do this. The problem is that you have people in place who have this mindset, and these are the advisors who help decide what policy is going to be, who help decide what targets get attacked, who help decide what response is appropriate to certain actions. And I mean, it's not a matter of some nefarious master plan. It's a matter of, are you getting the best possible advice, the advice that is actually supporting, for example, a secular nation, that is supporting the rights and freedoms of everyone in the United States, that is actually acting in the best interest of the world? Or are you getting advice from people who'd really like to see this huge conflagration in the Middle East with Jesus coming back in glory? And, you know, it's not so much a master plan as it is
undue influence.
An installation of ignorance and idiocy. That it'd be like, I don't know, hiring Ken Ham as your science advisor.
He might be a nice guy, but, you know, whatever.
I'm picking on Ken Ham particularly because I'll have to rant about him.
You have to rant about
shortly.
Him. So the stakes of this command and control problem are very high, right? The U.S. is very powerful. We can do a lot of harm directly or indirectly around the world, and we need to sort of be in control and not have somebody else be controlling the military.
Right.
It's very simple. The third thing is this whole idea of religious influence of the military causes a lot of problems in foreign policy. There's this whole idea, this whole word of the crusade being used all the time, and this plays into the propaganda of the other side. Right? The world knows what a crusade is. Americans generally don't. But let me spell it out. You know, the crusade was a time in the medieval times when the Christians decided, hell, we want the Holy Lands. We're going to go, by God, and take them. And we're going to kill pretty much everybody that gets in our way. And the mantra of that time was, you know, kill them all and let God sort it out. In fact, I forget, but that's basically a quote of one of the religious leaders at that time: kill them all and let God sort it out. And you know, the world remembers what this is, and especially Islam remembers what this is, and the Jews remember what this is because they got slaughtered along the way because they were in the way. And so the world knows about this. So saying that you're going to have a crusade for Jesus in the Middle East is pretty much like saying, well, I'm going to go have a mission to complete Jews in Israel, and we'll call it a Holocaust for Jesus. You know, it's that stark. It's that's the emotional reaction that the world has to this, or converting blacks by lynching for Jesus. You know, having, you know, it's that sort of thing. You know, and so this raises the whole question of, are you really ignorant of what you mean when you say this, when you use the word crusade, or are you malign? Do you know how awful that was and what a bad thing that was, right? So, you know, calling you ignorant is the generous interpretation. Right, calling Americans ignorant of that is a generous interpretation. The not so generous interpretation is that you know what you're talking about, and you really do mean crusade. You really do mean to go out and kill other people for your religious beliefs.
And to be fair, I don't think that's the case for most of them. I think they really are ignorant.
Okay.
And the reason I think they're ignorant, I'll get to that after your fourth point.
Okay. Well, you know, and if you go out and do this religious stuff, the world starts to believe that we've abandoned our principles as a secular nation, and that's causes an incredible amount of credibility, right? If we go out and say we're going to bring democracy or whatever, freedom to whatever, and we don't even hold up to our own principles, it's all smoke, blowing smoke. It's nonsense. And the end times theology is a terrible basis for foreign policy, of any policy, military or otherwise. You know, they were actually trying to promote a video game, sending it overseas, where the video game, you know, you'd shoot up non-believers, and the non-believers looked like UN peacekeepers, and that's just really, really, really stupid to be trying to do this, to send this out with the troops. And the fourth problem is why is this a problem? Is these people are insane. I mean, these religious beliefs are certifiable nuts. They're malign. They're they're comparable, I think, to Nazism. They're comparable to, going out and killing people. I think the snuff porn analogy is right on. Anyway, so this is why it's a problem. We can take some calls since we don't have a lot of callers. I have one more thing that I was going to save for later, and that is who's trying to fight this and who's trying to fix this problem. And fortunately, we have some people that are trying to stop this. And this is the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. We can talk about that now, or we can take a little break and do some other.
Let's come back to it in a minute. I don't know if there was something wrong with the phone line, but we lost the callers that were on. So as a reminder, the number's up actually on the screen. I watched a special on, I don't know, Discovery, TLC, one of those pseudo-educational channels on sniper school, and one of the things that they do in training in order to act as a distraction and give them the real world kind of combat environment stress thing is they have the Islamic call to prayer playing really loud, blasting over there. I understand this is an instruction based in reality, that they're going to be over there and hearing the Islamic call to prayer. Although there may be some objection to actually using that as opposed to other noises. Maybe it's the best training because that's the reality of the situation. On the other hand, when like the Discovery Channel or whoever is doing a documentary on the U.S. sniper school, and I don't know, maybe somebody from Al Jazeera happens to see it, they see U.S. snipers training with the Islamic call to prayer blasting at them, and that kind of reinforces the idea that we're in this.
Oh yeah, we've provided them all sorts of propaganda material. We they don't even really have to make much up.
So when I mention that, in general, I think people are largely ignorant of issues like the crusade and things. It comes down to something that I've actually had to discuss a couple of times in the last week. You have people, and the dominionists don't care about this issue of whether or not we were founded as a Christian nation. They don't care about the Constitution of the Founding Fathers or what the facts of the situation are. And they go to, one step back. God gave us everything, and we're supposed to have dominion over it. So even if we're wrong about this being a Christian nation, we're still going to try and make it one.
Well, they have this idea that, our leaders are appointed by God.
Right.
That, Bush is our Messiah and the chief and
yes,
that sort of thing, right?
So we should crucify him. I'm speaking figuratively, and I'm sure that I'll have FBI at my doorstep later. It was figuratively. But
I got a good FBI story for dinner if people want to come to dinner.
Great.
A really good FBI story.
Cool. But the reason I talk about this is there's this constant hammering about this is a Christian nation founded on Christian principles, and the Bible is the source of law, which anybody who actually, and I kid you not, people will post things on like internet forums saying a fact is a fact and you just need to go read the Constitution. And I'm like, I carry a copy with me everywhere I go. I have read it. Article 6, there'll be no religious test for any public office or trust. And the First Amendment guarantees that everyone have free, essentially, depending on how you want to interpret it, free reign over their own conscience with regard to what they want to believe, worship, and how they go about it. But, we had a guy pop up on the Atheist Experience blog that Martin runs, posting, some nonsensical quote from George Washington about how... Washington? Did I say Washington?
It's a washing
machine.
machine.
I really have been down the South for way too long. George Washington, about how you can't have morality without religion. And evidently, he could have run in this election, since we saw that from...
Oh, a lot of these, there's this group that does this prayer breakfast, and they actually use a Washington quote that I think that might be the same one, and it's actually a fake quote. Did I steal your thunder?
No, but this one's already
there are
been deleted,
there are a lot of
reference
fake quotes running around just as propaganda.
So I wrote something which I'm gonna rattle off bits and pieces of real quickly. If I was supposed to go to church this morning, but I stayed out way too late. There's a nice associate pastor at a local church, and he and I have been talking.
You know those heathens, they don't want to be responsible.
I was out sinning. I was out sinning way too late.
Giving him propaganda material.
No, he's a really nice guy, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And by the way, if you're watching, Brad, I apologize for not making it this morning. I really was out way too late, and I'll try and do it next week. But the thing that I wanted to get to on this is that there are a number of people who believe that this is a Christian nation. And the comment that I made before is that, well, yeah, if the majority of people are Christians, then yes, we are. Just like we're a female nation and a white nation.
Wouldn't despite that.
That has nothing to do with what we're based on or anything else. And they pop up occasionally, quotes from the Founding Fathers. I gave Dan a hard time for not quoting Patrick Henry, who was probably one of the most rabid pro-Christian nation members of the Founding Fathers. It's just that he's so ridiculous in his quotes that even most of the theists who advocate this don't tend to quote him.
Keep their distance. Huh?
So they go for kind of like subtler quotes, but they'll claim, well, Jefferson was a Christian. Yeah, in his own words, he claimed that he was a Christian, and he did. He did. He claimed that he was a Christian in the truest possible sense. The thing is that all of you true Christians out there would look at what Jefferson's Christianity was and say he wasn't a Christian. And in fact, he also said he was a deist. These guys tended to contradict themselves a little bit, but you know why? It's because you're going out and picking out quotes from different points in people's lives. I used to say I was a Christian. I was. You can find somewhere where I've contradicted myself. What matters is, what do I believe now? And that doesn't mean we go to somebody's deathbed to find out, what they thought at the end of it. But what were the governing principles of the major decisions in their life?
Well, speaking of deathbed, it's a common practice to put quotes in people's mouths after they die about, the deathbed confessions. Oh, I really believed in God.
It goes hand in hand with putting a pen in the dead man's hand to sign over his lands to the church. But anyway, I wanted to touch on this Christian nation thing again, just because it seems to keep coming up no matter how many times we talk about it. So this is bits and pieces of a little something that I wrote in response to somebody else making this claim. Quote, "The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." You know where that is?
That's the Treaty of Tripoli.
Article 11 of the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli.
Okay.
This was negotiated under George Washington. The treaty took effect under John Adams. It was debated and unanimously approved by the Senate of the United States without any controversy or complaint about the language. There's your Founding Fathers.
Yeah.
These guys really understood what religious freedom was. In 1786, before the Constitution was written, Patrick Henry, the nut job I referred to earlier, submitted a proposal to the state of Virginia to publicly finance the teaching of Christianity in schools. What happened? Virginians rejected it, and instead, they passed the Act for Establishing Religious Freedom. This act, which prohibited tax support for religious institutions and religious tests for public office, was supported by evangelicals who feared, as they were a minority in an Episcopalian state, government intrusion upon their rights to practice their beliefs.
They should be afraid.
The very people who are now removing language from the U.S. Air Force code that would establish diversity, freedom, they've removed that. Why? Because they're in the majority. Because now they feel the protection of having the majority of the population, or the majority of the finances, or the majority of the power. You no longer need religious protection of your religious freedoms if you're in the majority. That's the time when you try to take over. And that's exactly what's happening.
Hypocrisy is really what it is.
Yeah. The religious freedoms that were established in that Virginia Act were the foundation for both the language in Article 6, no religious test for public office, and for the First Amendment, which guarantees that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or abridging the freedom and rights of the people to practice thereof. And I butchered the last half, but I've got it if you want to read it. The Founding Fathers weren't all of one mind on these issues. Washington didn't have any problem with making presidential proclamations that thanked God. Jefferson, on the other hand, felt that those proclamations were unconstitutional. So what did the other Founding Fathers have to say on the subject? First, it doesn't matter. They were largely pro-slavery, but that doesn't make slavery a good thing or the ideal. They could have established, if they wanted to, a Christian nation, and they'd have been wrong to do so. What the Founding Fathers had to say doesn't have any bearing on how things should be. The only reason that I bring this stuff up is because people lie and present misinformation about what the Founding Fathers did actually believe. What did they, oh, they were mostly Christians. You're correct. There were only a handful of deists. There were a lot of Protestants. There were a handful of Puritans and other religious beliefs, a couple of Catholics even. There weren't even that many deists. None of them openly professed atheism, although I think if we...
None of them were Jews, as I remember.
No.
Which is, kind of funny because there's this propaganda going on about Judeo-Christian nation and all that BS, right?
We need the myth of Judeo-Christianity to put to an end right there. Yeah, they were. But it's those who are influenced by German freethinkers and deists are the ones who are most influential in founding what our government is. Many times, and one of the quotes addresses this, language was attempted to be introduced to our Constitution showing deference to Jesus Christ, and in every instance, it was voted down. So let's see what some of them had to say. Ben Franklin. When a religion is good, I conceive it will support itself, and when it does not support itself and God does not take care to support it, so that its professors are obliged to call for the help of civil power, it is a sign I apprehend of it being a bad one. Some books against deism fell into my hands. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them, for the arguments of the deists, which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to me to be much stronger than the refutations. In short order, I soon became a thorough deist. I don't think I need to quote Thomas Paine. I'd love to, but Christians tend to write him off. Oh, he wasn't a real founding father. Yeah, he's just the guy who came up with the name United States of America. He's just the guy that Ben Franklin brought over to help establish this country. He's just the guy who, after getting this country established, goes over to the French Revolution. He's not important or anything. It doesn't matter that most school kids have never heard of him. It doesn't matter that he said things like,
he's a brilliant man.
All natural institutions of churches, whether Jewish, Christian, or Turkish, appear to me to be no other than human inventions, set up to testify and enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit. I do not believe in the creed professed by the Jewish church, by the Roman church, by a Greek church, by the Turkish church, by the Protestant church, nor by any church that I know of. Each of these churches accuse the other of unbelief, and of my own part, I disbelieve them all.
Yay.
Despite the fact that he identifies himself as a deist, I think it's clear that Thomas Paine would have been an atheist by today's standards. James Madison, who is my personal favorite of all the Founding Fathers, despite some good quotes from Jefferson, the civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of conscience be in any manner or in any pretense infringed. Religion and government will both exist in greater purity, the less they are mixed together. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it to every noble enterprise. During almost 15 centuries has the legal establishment of Christianity been on trial. What have been its fruits? More or less in all places, pride and insolence of the clergy, ignorance and servility in the laity, in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution. In a letter in 1785 to James Monroe, there was an attempt to introduce a bill into Congress to set aside public funds to support churches. If you want any definitive statement about how the founders, and oh, by the way, one of the authors of the First Amendment, and what it meant to them, here it is. How a regulation so unjust in itself, so foreign to the authority of Congress, and so hurtful to the sale of public land, and smelling so strongly of an antiquated bigotry, could have received the countenance of a committee is truly a matter of astonishment. The appropriation of funds of the United States for the use and support of religious societies is contrary to the article of the Constitution, which declares that Congress shall make no law respecting a religious establishment. There's tons of other quotes from Madison, from Adams. We could go on, and I don't want to because, as I mentioned before, it doesn't really matter.
Those are great ones.
We weren't founded as a Christian nation. We were founded as a secular nation. We were founded as a nation where you're free to conform to your own conscience with regard to what your beliefs are. You are free to practice your beliefs, including proselytization, to the extent that you begin to infringe upon the rights of others. One of the other comments from Madison is that the only true, and I won't get this quoted perfectly, but the only true government involvement in religion should be in settling disputes between religions, where the rights of one is infringed upon the rights of another, and there needs to be a neutral arbiter. There cannot be a neutral arbiter if the government is supporting one religion over another, one type of religion over another, or religion over irreligion. There must be neutrality. That is the only way there can possibly be true religious freedom. For those of you who think that our nation was founded on biblical principles and that our laws are based on the Bible, they're no more based on the Bible than they are on the Hammurabi Code. Actually, probably more so the latter. You go down the list of the 10 Commandments, for example. How many of those are reflected in U.S. laws? 2.5. If you count adultery, which is illegal in some states, although largely not prosecuted. First commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Hey, first commandment, First Amendment.
Line them up, right?
Put them up together. Shot down. Honor thy father and mother. You don't have to do that. You don't have any graven images. The first 5 are all about how to worship God. None of them apply. Then you get to one, thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder, depending on your interpretation. Pretty good rule. Mm-hmm. I'm in favor of that one.
Well, those were both in part of the British common law before Christianity made it up there. So
well, every
has a
system of
history.
Laws has always included prohibitions against murders. And if you think that we needed a stone tablet carved from this divine, awesome superhero in the sky to tell us not to kill people, you're an idiot.
Yeah, we can.
I apologize.
We can figure that out on our own.
I apologize for being polemic and insulting, but if you really think that it was necessary for somebody to actually write down, I am God and I say don't kill each other, in order for us to realize that killing people is bad, you are an idiot. It's just that simple.
But then the Bible's a genocide manual, right? So,
yeah.
So it's just...
Thou shalt not kill, unless it be thy neighbors who worship some other god, in which case I want you to go to them and say, if you surrender to us now, by the way, this is in the Bible, but I'm paraphrasing, you will live and you can be our slaves. And if they don't agree to be your slaves, kill them all. Walk in there, kill every living thing, including pregnant women. And if a woman's pregnant, make sure you slice open the belly so you get the baby inside, so we don't ever have to deal with any of their kind again. But you can keep the young virgins and divvy them up amongst yourselves. Just make sure you give a portion of those virgins to the church. Because the church needs young virgins. This God character in the Bible, we were talking about the Passion of Christ earlier, and I mentioned how it was just this gruesome gore fest that was obnoxious. And the Christians watch it, and I've seen them watch it, and I can almost understand, because I've been there to some extent. I watched it, they showed Passion of the Christ at the Hell House we went to. You could see these young girls, almost exclusively, breaking down in tears and crying, hysterical, watching the Passion of the Christ.
It's emotional manipulation is what it is.
It is emotional manipulation. The thing is, they have it drilled into them. Look how much Jesus had to suffer for you. This is your fault.
Oh, yeah.
And my thing is...
It's a big guilt trip.
Within the paradigm of your religious theology, doesn't God make all the rules? Couldn't he have come up with some other loophole? Couldn't Jesus' death been a much less gruesome? What is it about your God?
The blood sacrifice rule was made by the flying spaghetti monster. That's why God had to follow it.
No, that's pasta sauce. That's tomato sauce. What is it about your God that has him so obsessed with the smell of blood? Why is it that priests for centuries had to carve open innocent animals and burn them so that the smell of blood could rise up and please the nostrils of Yahweh? Why is it that the only way that he could go ahead and make up for his continual screw-ups that he blames on humanity is to come down and take human form and offer himself as a sacrifice to himself and have the crap kicked out of him unbelievably. And oh, by the way, for those of you who are thinking just how bad this was, crucifixion and scourging was kind of common. there's no good reason to think that Jesus suffered inordinately above and beyond everybody else. Okay, maybe, by the way, there's no reason to think he existed, but I'm going to go into that assumption. Maybe the rest of the guys who were crucified didn't get the crown of thorns or a spear in the side. But you know what? They all got nailed up. They all got beaten with scourges. They were all pretty screwed, and they all died. And you know what? Those other guys who died, they stayed dead. What kind of sacrifice is it if you come back?
The lack of a body is evidence that Jesus never existed. It's not evidence that there was a supernatural event. So my big complaint with that whole thing is, was Jesus a God or was he a man? If he was a man, yeah, he suffered and he died and he's dead. So, end of story. If he's a God, then there's really no sacrifice here.
Yeah, and it depends on what Christian you ask. And I'm not kidding about that. Let's say there is a God, and he comes to me, whether I'm actually divine or not. But let's say he comes to me and makes me this deal and says, I need somebody to just be whipped and beaten and flayed and have their skin peeled off and their eyeballs gouged out, and I'm going to just torture you beyond more than any human being has ever been tortured. I'm going to string you up, nail you up, cut you up, everything, and you're going to die, and I need you to do this in order to make sure that nobody ever suffers again. I'd probably do it. I have enough people that I care about that I wish they wouldn't suffer that I could do like a cost-benefit analysis to go through it. But if he says, oh, and by the way, in 3 days you get to come back and be kind of a God, well, where do I sign up for that deal? Come on, punch me in the face.
Right.
Punch me in the face for Jesus.
Right.
Anyway, you have a final thing on your...
Let me do my final little thing, and this is focusing on what has been the response to these dominionists and dispensationalists sort of trying to take over the military, and that is there's a group called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation that has been very active in countering these sort of things, and it's spearheaded by one guy by the name of Mikey Weinstein.
Sounds Jewish.
He is Jewish. He is Jewish. I don't know if he's a believer or not. That's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, I don't care.
His children in the military...
By the way, there are plenty of good believers, plenty of good Christian folks who agree with us on a number of things, including the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, run by Reverend Barry Lynn.
Right.
There are good Christian folks who probably believe some of the same things that the Dominionists do. They just have a greater appreciation for how people should act in a cooperative society, how we have to get along, and that converting people by different methods and not by force is probably a better way.
State, yeah. I mean, the church-state separation is a generally good principle, and everybody should be behind it. I mean, just think that one of my little phrases is the state religion won't be your religion. Right. Well, whatever it is, it won't be yours.
Yeah. Well, I thought about this the other day, and I'm not sure if you'd agree with me, so I'll ask you. Obviously, you have a number of countries where they've instituted a state religion of no religion, or atheism, even though it's not really a religion. If you were to go out and create your own country from scratch, you get this island, and you actually want people to come there and live cooperatively, and you create your own government. Do you ban religion or not?
How would you enforce such a thing?
You can't.
Right.
You can't. The first principle I'd have are almost identical to what we have in the United States, where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are the key elements, where the rights of the power of the government is derived from the consent of the governed, that people are free to engage their conscience in regard to their beliefs, because you can't possibly regulate it anyway. How can you change what's in my head? You can't. You can't control it. All you can do is control the actions that I have. And if I were creating my perfect utopia, people would be free to act upon whatever beliefs they have to the extent that they infringe on the rights of others. And I've interrupted you again.
It's okay. That's okay.
We didn't get callers today. So.
We didn't get any callers. And
I do have a correction, though.
We do.
The pub crawl, which I said was March 8th at 7, is actually March 7th at 8.
Okay. March 7th at 8.
March 7th.
Check the website.
At 8 p.m. at the Dog and Duck Go
website. Okay. So we have this Military Religious Freedom Foundation. I consider this Mikey Weinstein a patriot of the highest order. I think he's the greatest guy. He's, a Republican credentialed lawyer. Generally don't like lawyers, but he's a good guy. He used to be one of the JAGs. He served under the Reagan administration. He worked with Ross Perot. He's a very conservative kind of guy, but man, he's got the right attitude about religious freedom in the military. His group is currently handling about 6,000 complaints from various people who have had this sort of, or seen this sort of thing, or been influenced by this sort of military coercion. And here's the most interesting thing I learned is most of the people who are filing complaints are actually non-dominionist Christians. So the vast majority of the people who are coming forward and saying, there's something wrong here, are actually Christians.
And good for them.
And good for them.
This is exactly the same thing that happened in 1786 in Virginia. One smaller group of Christians says, you know what, you believe what you want to believe, but your beliefs don't represent mine. And I'm going to do what I can to make sure you can't legislate them upon me. So we're seeing a resurgence of this. And as I want to be as fair as possible on here, we've, at a number of times on the program, especially you and I, when we get into these conversations about this, said, what's wrong with you Christians out there? If these people, if these Fred Phelpses and dominionists, and if they're not representing Christianity to you, why aren't you speaking out and doing something? Why are you letting them give you a bad name? You guys are using the same label, and you're providing safe harbor for the extremists and nut jobs by keeping your mouth shut. Why do we, as atheists, as seculars, have to do all the legwork on supporting proper religious freedom? Or not, and not all. I mean, but why aren't you guys?
We're here doing it almost.
You
every
guys are
episode.
out there in huge numbers with money. I mean, atheists represent somewhere between 1 to 9% maybe of the population, and depending on how you want to classify things, non-believer, non-religious, whatever. Granted, we're growing. But you guys have centuries of organization and funding behind you, and all it takes is a few of you to stand up, get your ass on CNN and say, you know what? I'm a Christian. I don't believe the things that they're saying. I don't believe that we should be doing the things that they're doing. And finally, some of them are doing it. And kudos to you. I salute you. And you and I can go out and have a drink. You can have water.
Yeah, so,
Iced tea.
So a lot of Christians feel persecuted by this sort of thing, and this should be sort of a little wake-up call, I think, to people that hey, maybe this church-state separation thing is a good thing. So this Military Religious Freedom Foundation is alleging and documenting a systematic campaign by religious extremists in the military, and Mikey has given up on coddling and persuasion. I mean, he's tried that, but he's basically saying, well, this doesn't work. These people are very dead serious, right? They are doing this for their God, and they don't care about the laws and these sorts of things. So he is filing lawsuits and formal complaints, and he's getting some action with that. So I admire that. In response, they have called him the Field General of the Godless Armies of Satan, a title which he loves.
Oh, man. Why didn't I get that title?
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
So I wanted the title so bad.
maybe next year.
God, that is the best. I love that guy.
Yeah.
I've never heard him, never met him. I love that guy.
And he's a take no prisoners, no nonsense guy, and I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley. He's a serious
Read that
guy.
again. Read, what is his title?
The Field General of the Godless Armies of Satan. Isn't that wonderful?
I want that on a plaque.
And he wears this as a badge of honor, so he thinks that's great. So he himself and his family have endured all sorts of persecution by these folks. He's had a campaign of children and women calling his home at all hours of the night, remind his children too, giving them death threats. So these people, these Christians, are apparently think so lowly of this guy that they've trained their children to call him in the middle of the night and give them death threats.
So, we've had
that
death
tells
threats.
you a lot about that.
We've had death threats, never from children.
Never from children.
From people with the intellect of a child, but never from children.
Yep. Anyway, you guys,
I can live without that.
raise your children well,
though.
right?
I'd rather not. people call the Bible the good book, and one of the things I always ask them, when they do that, is say, okay, well then let me read it to your kid. You sit your kid down with me. Give me whatever version of the Bible you want, as long as it's not one of those dumbed down for kids version that removes all the bad stuff. And let me read Bible stories to your kid. I won't actually do it because I have more respect for your kid than you do, and I have more disrespect for your holy book than you do. But anybody who says it's the good book hasn't read it. It's just that simple.
Right. So he's also had his windows blown out in his house and all this stuff, and his attitude is, get in line. His attitude, he just says, screw you all, I'm going to continue on, and he is very set in his mission, and he's a very very perseverant guy, and I admire him. I admire him for doing that. And as I said, I consider him a patriot of the first order for doing this, to try to fix this problem, to defending. He's really just defending the Constitution, and he's making some progress. His group is making some progress. Most of the penalties that have been dealt out because of his efforts have just been hand slaps, but he's making some progress. He got them to not send this video game to this Left Behind video game to Iraq, to the soldiers in Iraq. We talked about that a while ago. I mentioned it earlier in the show too. But it was actually his group that caused them to double think this. And he's got a number of lawsuits going on, which is good, to where they're actually getting some real justice for these cases. So this whole effort is still ongoing. This is not a past history thing. This is something that's ongoing, and he's still fighting this fight. And if you'd like to learn more, you can check out their website, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. You can find them on the web, or you can get involved one way or another. But I recommend taking a look at this, because it's pretty scary to me, having outside groups interfere with the military. It bothers me a lot as an American that this is going on, and I hope it bothers everybody else in the audience. I'm actually kind of shocked we haven't had callers call and say, "Hey, this is crazy. This shouldn't be happening." I hope the people watching have that attitude. I hope people are listening to what I have to say. Anyway.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I don't live in fear of the religious takeover of the government or religious takeover of the military. That doesn't mean I'm in favor of it. I think these are things that need to be opposed. People need to be made aware of it, not because there's the potential for ultimate catastrophe or apocalypse, but because it's just wrong. And for atheist members of the military to be forced to try to work and live in an environment because these guys do live their job. They live their job. You can't go out on a 6-month cruise and not live your job. You can't go out and be deployed to Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, wherever, and not live your job. You're 24/7 regardless of when you're standing watch or when you're on duty. They shouldn't be forced to live in an environment that is intrinsically hostile to their beliefs. It's fine you don't have to check your religion at the door, same as we talked about last week with politicians. I'm not expecting people to check their religion to the door. By all means, do as your conscience dictates to the extent that it infringes upon the rights of others. That's it. If everybody did that, I wouldn't have anything to complain about.
Yeah, this is a fairness and courtesy issue.
Yeah.
This is that simple.
I don't walk into your church and badmouth you. I'd never do it. I don't make calls out from this phone to religious people or people in general and say, "Hey, do you believe in a God? Let me tell you why you're an idiot." Because first of all, I don't think they're an idiot just because they believe in a God. I mean, there's lots of reasons where people can be mistaken, confused, and whatever. But we've run out of time despite the lack of callers. Don got through more than usual. We'll see you next week. Thanks to everybody on the crew. Thanks to all you guys who are watching. You can email tv@atheist-community.org. We can't promise to answer every one of them, but we do read them all. Any feedback, criticisms, questions, or concern. And you can join us at El Arroyo in just a few minutes on 5th Street. Thanks for watching.